Manchester City have now tabled their opening offer for Matheus Nunes. It's around about £47 million. I'm told it was rejected immediately by Wolverhampton Wanderers, falls well below their valuation. They insist they're not under financial pressure to sell, but I sense this might not be the last that we've heard of it from Manchester City's perspective.
So they've gone in, 47 million is low. They've gone in lowish in terms of Wolves' opinion of what it would take, Simon. This is the start of a cat and mouse game, isn't it?
Well, wherever they would have gone in, Wolves would have pushed back. Interesting, is it? Wolves are not under any pressure to sell, but they certainly were under pressure to buy. That's why their manager left.
Yeah, true. It's an odd one. It really is a strange one. Moise Kean, is he in the news this morning?
Yeah, somebody that Everton fans will remember, maybe won't remember particularly fondly. Didn't work out for him at Goodison Park, did it? Maybe shows the dearth of number 9s that we've been talking about throughout the transfer window, that Fulham are looking at him as a potential replacement for Alexander Mitrovic. I'm told talks between Fulham and Juventus, where he is now, have begun, and that Juventus are open to a sale. So maybe this could be one that Fulham could get wrapped up pretty quickly. They certainly need a focal point up front.
Okay, all right. Things moving along. There's hardly a day goes by, Alex, that we don't mention a Romelu Lukaku. So let's mention him. Is he going to Tottenham?
I don't think so, Jim. It's been mentioned in Italy that Tottenham could be a potential escape route, if you like, for Lukaku out of Chelsea. We talked about him yesterday, training with the under-21s. Pochettino, I think, has made it pretty clear that even though Chelsea need goals, Lukaku isn't the solution. But I'm told Tottenham aren't in the race either. They're looking to shift players on rather than maybe add to the wage bill, and he is on significant money in terms of his wages at Spurs. So at the moment, Lukaku remains in limbo. I think Chelsea are trying to urge him to rethink the interest that he's had from Saudi Arabia, but certainly wasn't very keen on making that move earlier in the summer.
Isn't it strange, Simon, how a player like Lukaku, who was a big name player at one stage, finds himself in something of a cul-de-sac at the moment?
Good. What he sows. Wants to behave like that. There's a consequence of it. No one's bigger than the football clubs. And as soon as some of these players realise it, the better it will be. Romelu Lukaku opened this can of whoop-ass on himself, so he gets on with it, doesn't he? I've got no sympathy for it, because ultimately there was no necessity to do what he did. There was no necessity to turn it into the ridiculousness that he did. And he's now got himself to look at, which is a very talented footballer sitting in the reserves at Chelsea that Chelsea don't want and nobody else seems to want at the moment in time. And why is that? It's got nothing to do with talent. Nothing to do with talent, it's everything to do with attitude. Look at his attitude at Manchester United. Look at the stories that come out of his attitude at Man United. This isn't something that just manifested itself at Chelsea because Thomas Tuchel didn't play him where he wanted to play him. This is something that was inherent in the boy's outlook. And what's he got for it? A big bag of money and no game time. Wonderful. And he's a smart kid as well. He's a really smart kid. You know, 7, 8 different languages he speaks. He's an impressive footballer in so many ways, except when it comes to applying himself and understanding that where he fits in on the cog, which is he's part of the wheel. He isn't the wheel.
All right, you've got to think there's something. I mean, only he could articulate it like that. But you've got to think there's something in that, Alex. Right?
Yeah, I agree. I think Lukaku's had so many opportunities now at some top clubs. I mean, you look at his CV. We should be talking about Lukaku as he talks about himself. You know, one of the best strikers in Europe, maybe a Ballon d'Or contender. But I just don't feel like he's grasped the opportunity. I think the way that he messed into Milan around really is coming back to haunt him now. If you believe in karma, they were willing to take him, even though he didn't exactly cover himself in glory last season. He was really poor, particularly in that Champions League final. They were willing to give him an opportunity. Then they find out that he's negotiating with Juventus, a club that he said on record I'd never join. So I think Simon's right. I think he's brought a lot of this on himself.
Alex, I'll stop you as we progress at the moment. Lots of messages coming in here. I would love this. When Alex is on with us, of course, it's within your gift to get in touch with us and ask us whatever is on your mind. 81089 for that. You mentioned that Nunes to City and how they've failed with a bid of 47 million. Which you presume would be their opening bid to Wolves. A lot of people asking, what is the latest on Eberechi Eze to Manchester City? Is there a latest, or is he set to stay at Palace just as Michael Olise has done?
Well, I think the fact that City are turning their attentions now to Nunes and have gone as far as making that first offer, he looks to be their priority target. I think Eze would be a lot more expensive, even though we did report on the transfer notebook on the talkSPORT website earlier this summer that at the moment he's not keen to sign a new contract that's been on the offer from Palace for a while, but I think at the moment, if they're willing to go for Nunes, I don't see them necessarily spending the money it would take to get Eze out of Crystal Palace. I think eventually he'll join one of the big boys. I think Elise will as well. I think they're two very talented players, but Roy Hodgson needs to keep them, doesn't he?
Okay, he does indeed. A number of West Ham fans predictably asking, when are we going to get a signing over the line? Kudus, is it getting closer?
Yeah, getting closer, Jim. £38 million fee, pretty much agreed. Kudus, I think, is happy with the personal terms on offer at West Ham. There was a suspicion, as we spoke yesterday, that maybe Kudus was waiting for one of the big guns to come in for him. It looks like that isn't going to happen now. And I have been told as well that they might use him as a striker. Obviously, McElhenney scored a brilliant goal against Chelsea at the weekend. Danny Ings hasn't really worked out for him. Skamaka's gone. Paquetá looks like he's staying in the wake of those alleged betting breaches. So maybe Kudus could be used as a forward right at the top of the pitch, which will be interesting.
Okay. Brentford moving and shaking, Simon. If this comes to light, then they'll have smashed their transfer record. Tell us more, Alex.
Yeah, I watched Brentford last weekend, and this is going to be a bold claim, but I spoke to Thomas Frank after the game and I asked him, what's your ambitions for this season? What can you achieve? And he was talking about maybe replicating what Brighton did last year and trying to challenge for the top six. I don't think that's necessarily as outlandish as it sounds when you look at the fact that Manchester United have started the season badly. Chelsea are going through a bit of a state of flux at the moment. We don't really know what we're going to get from Liverpool. Brentford are so well run, and there are comparisons with Brighton, that if any of those big clubs do come up short, I think they could well take advantage. The player they're trying to sign is Nicolas Gonzalez from Fiorentina. It would take a club record offer, as you say. The Fiorentina manager has come out and said there is interest from Brentford, but he's staying. But I think this shows the ambition and the direction of travel for Brentford. I think they could have a really good season, even without Ivan Toney.
Do you know what? I love the way Alex explained that. And you've got to regard Brentford in the highest esteem for that. We will give it a go, Simon. Thomas Frank talking like that. That's what Brentford fans want to hear. What Brighton did, why can't we? And he's right.
Well, there's similar outlooks, isn't there? They've got similar mentalities running the business from two people that are both in the same sector in the spread betting world and look at things in a certain way. Brentford have had for a very long time had this ideal of recruiting players. They talk about it when I think it was Mark Devlin was their CEO, about fishing in a certain pond, and you'd constantly see Brentford players being sold on for big money. Scott Hogan being an example that went off and played somewhere else, and you see that. And now where you are is you've got a first team manager. You had a decent set of managers. Dean Smith did a decent job there. Mark Warburton did a decent job there. This fella Thomas Frank has gone in there and has really elevated it to a different level. So yes, you can get top-end players, which kind of defeats the Hibernian argument. But if you haven't got a top coach, then it doesn't matter, because Brighton and Brentford are recruiting players and their coaches are turning them into superstars. And isn't that, in part, what these bloody coaches are supposed to do? So with Brentford, if you look at the last two games, it's very early doors. But why shouldn't they fancy their chances?
Exactly.
They're acclimatised to the Premier League now. Their coach has committed himself to Brentford and talks about wanting to spend his time at Brentford, and the honour is to manage Brentford. And Tony goes out and they look better. Yes,
exactly. You're spot on. We'll finish with Everton at this stage, and Simon and I will be talking about Everton further down the line this morning. But when you look at the Telegraph Sports Supplement, Alex, doesn't look good. Everton hit by new cash crisis. The man beside me here and I will get into that shortly. But are they in the market this morning?
Yeah, they're desperate to sign a number 9, Jim. Dominic Calvert-Lewin injured again, won't play this weekend. You have to feel sorry for him because his body just keeps on letting him down. Actually, in the case of last weekend, it was just a really unfortunate incident that forced him off. We know they've had bids in for Shea Adams. I'm told that Shea Adams at the moment is just waiting to see what happens in terms of interest from other clubs between now and the end of the window. Maybe not that keen to join Everton. And it looks like Everton turning their attentions elsewhere now. Beto, Brazilian striker, Udinese, definite talks between the two clubs. So they're trying to get players in. But as you say, that financial situation, the way that they've started the season, I'm not sure that Everton are that an attractive prospect for players at the moment.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.